do the normal stuff. And then during the director's report, I'll read some instructions that will help help the audience with how the process is going to work.
Okay, great. Welcome everyone to the Salt Lake City Planning Commission meeting of April 8th, 2020. This is a new format for all of us, so please be forgiving of any technical glitches as we get used to being virtual here in the Planning Commission. The first item on our agenda is the approval of minutes for March 11th, 2020. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll move approval.
And I'll second that.
Okay, we've got a motion from Brenda and a second from Sarah. We'll do our roll call. Maureen?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Brenda?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
And Crystal? And
Yes.
you can abstain since
Yeah.
Abstaining probably makes more sense.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, motion passes. The next item on our agenda is the report of the chair and the vice chair. And other than adjusting to our new realities, I really don't have anything to report. How about you, Brenda?
Wait a second.
Okay, then we will go on to the report of the director, and Nick, take it away.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Just give me a thumbs up. I want to make sure. Okay, so I have on the screen some links that hopefully everybody can see about how you can submit comments during the meeting. Everybody will have the opportunity to speak during the public hearing. So but first off, if you're having a hard time, you're watching on channel 17 or on YouTube, and you're having a hard time trying to get onto the WebEx meeting, on the screen is the address that that will help guide you to connect. If you need help, you can email us at planning.comments@slcgov.com. We're monitoring that email address live, so we'll be able to see your comments, and we have a number of staff members who get those comments, who can help us troubleshoot and help make sure that any comments submitted are heard and read into the record. So just some tips when you log in. If you used your phone, you may want to use your phone for audio. It's a little bit more consistent of a connection, and if we don't lose internet access, then you can still hear everything. It also helps prevent some of the background echoing that happens. In terms of submitting comments, for everybody who's logged into WebEx, we can see your name and how you joined, and we will give you, when we open that specific item that you're here to speak about, you should be able to see a little icon towards the bottom of your screen that it looks like a little hand. It's usually on the panel side. You click that, it'll alert us that you have a comment, and that way we'll know who's here to speak on what. If for whatever reason you can't find that and you want to speak, send an email to the planning.comments@slcgov.com, and then just saying, I want to speak, but I can't figure out my hand, and in the email, put your name so we know who it is, and that way we can make sure that everybody is given as best of opportunity as we possibly can to speak. As normal, we obviously ask for all the comments to be respectful and to focus on the issue at hand. Speakers who are not being respectful may be muted, and you can submit the rest of your comments to that same planning.comments@slcgov.com. Just like our normal meetings, recognized organizations will be given 5 minutes to make comments. Individual comments are limited to 2 minutes. When your 2 minutes are up, and this is really at your discretion, Commissioner Bell, on when you want me to cut them off, but we will mute people. So I think if you want to, I'll have a timer if you want to, when hopefully you'll hear that timer, but I can say time. And at that point, if you want to let people know to wrap it up, they can, or you can direct me what you want me to do with the mute button. We're going to try to keep the commissioner's video feeds visible at all times. Staff members and others will probably not have their video on unless we're part of the discussion. So applicants will have about 10 minutes to make their presentation. And when it's their turn, I will move, the hosts will move the applicant up to a participant level so they can share their presentation, their screen, so everybody can see. And just to reiterate kind of the role of the Planning Commission, because we have two different types of items on the agenda tonight. We have legislative items and administrative items. The legislative items are those items where where the Planning Commission is making a recommendation to the City Council, and the City Council is ultimately the decision maker. The other items are referred to as administrative items. Those are things like conditional uses or design review and plan developments, where the Planning Commission is the decision maker. And those decisions are the role of the Planning Commission really is to make sure that all the applicable standards are complied with, and go from there. So with that, unless anybody on the commission has any questions, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to you, Adrian, so you can start the meeting.
Would you like to introduce our newest planning commissioner?
Oh, I would. Crystal, I'm actually going to let Crystal introduce herself. She kind of already did, but Crystal was appointed by the City Council last night. So day one, literally. Crystal, do you want to introduce yourself? I don't know if she's actually on anymore.
She switched to be a panelist. She flipped up into the panelist list, but then she switched back into the attendee list. I don't know why.
There we go, Crystal. You're back into the panelist list. You want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. I don't know if oh, my video, here we go. I had to switch from my phone to my computer, but hello, everybody. My name is Crystal Young Otterstrom. I do know many of you already and adore many of you, but I professionally am the Executive Director of the Cultural Alliance, which works to advocate for and amplify the arts and humanities. So bring a little different voice, maybe. And I'm just really thrilled to serve Salt Lake City and work with all of you to make our city even better than it already is.
Great. Thank you, Crystal. Welcome. We're happy to have you join us. Okay. Let's go ahead and get started with the public hearing portion. So item number 1 on our agenda is the Rose Park Buddhist Temple conditional use at approximately 1185 West, 1000 North. This is case number PLN PCM 2020-00078. And is Chrissy presenting? Yes, I see Chrissy's name up there.
He is.
Can you hear me?
We can. Let me move control over to you, Chrissy. Now you have control. You should anyway.
Okay, can you see my screen?
We can
Yeah.
now.
So this is a conditional use request for a place of worship in a single family zone for a property located at approximately 1185 West, 1000 North. property is zoned R1 7,000 single residential. The property was originally granted conditional use approval in 1996, but this request is required to be reviewed as a new conditional use due to a proposed renovation, which would increase the floor area by more than 25%.
So I'm
Chrissy, can you
unable to
get
hear
closer to the
Chrissy.
microphone?
Yeah, I can't hear her.
Chrissy, can you try to adjust your microphone?
Yeah, let me see what I can.
There we go. That's way better.
That's better?
Yep.
Okay, I will start over. So this is a conditional use request for a place of worship in a single family zone for a property located at approximately 1185 West, 1000 North. This is an R1 7000 zone. The property was originally granted conditional use approval in 1996, but it's required to go through a new conditional use because of they are proposing a renovation that would increase the floor area by more than 25%. Staff is recommending approval for this item. So the site currently contains an existing building which will be renovated to add a second story. That second story will accommodate a grand hall, office, and other support spaces. I'll show you elevations for that on the next slide. The hours of operation are expected to remain the same from about 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And although they are increasing the floor area and adding a second story, they're not planning on having more seating for their congregation. So the seating on any given Sunday is expected to remain about 30 to 50 individuals. Additionally, there is 2 residential units on site, one for a person that's there all the time and then one for a visiting clergy. These are allowed through a past administrative interpretation. As far as neighborhood compatibility goes, the intended use of the renovation is actually to move events that are currently held outside indoors. So this would presumably reduce the impact on the neighborhood. Additionally, the site is bordered to the northeast by the Unity Baptist Church and Rose Park Elementary School to the east and their tract to the south. There are single-family homes on the northwest corner and west, but the uses surrounding the site are generally compatible with the use, and it is an existing use that's just expanding. This is the elevation that shows the second story that will be added. The renovation went through a special exception process over the summer of 2019. This was approved by staff as it can be approved at the administrative level. The maximum height allowed in a R1 7000 zone is 28 feet, and they were proposing 31 feet 10 inches. This was approved due to the neighborhood compatibility that I mentioned before, where the elementary school to the east is currently 32 feet. So this was thought to be appropriate use and was approved in May 2019. So overall, as you can see in your staff report, this meets the standards of conditional use approval and complies with the criteria of detrimental effects. So staff is recommending approval. We did not receive any public comments on this request. And that is the end of my presentation.
Great. Thank you, Chrissy. Any questions for Chrissy before we open up the public hearing?
You may want to see if the applicant has anything to add.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm all out of whack here.
Yeah.
Now we'll hear. So, okay, no questions for Chrissy right now? No. Okay. Let's
Maureen
hear
has
from the
her hand
applicant.
up. I don't know if.
Maureen, do you have a question?
No, I was just trying to get somebody's attention to get her.
Oh, okay.
So I'm fine now. Yeah.
She's just trying to keep me on track. That's all.
Will you, Maureen, if you click on your hand, that same icon, it'll go down. There we go. All right. The applicant is Casey Lau. Casey, I've moved you to a panelist. If you have anything to add.
Hello, could you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, yeah, this is a Casey Liao with KCL Design. I'm the architect for this project. I thank you for Christy. You have a very good presentation. And then all the document is on her kind of PowerPoint, and then I just like to address, the main purpose of this project is we try to increase the indoor space, and then which we can have a host event inside instead of outside, so we can reduce the impact for the neighborhood. And then the reason we want to put a increased space on the existing building is this building is very beautiful, and then we really like to keep that, and then we want to also reduce the environmental impact for those demolition issue. So we wish we can directly just put a space on the existing building. So that's all we have. And then I wish we can just can move forward on this project. That's it.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the applicant from the commission? Okay. Okay, we'll now open up the public hearing, but I'm getting some feedback. All right, let's see if this works. Okay. Is there anyone, so I'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone from the community council here who would wish to speak? Okay, I will take that as a no. Nick, is there anyone in general who wishes to speak on this item?
I'm guessing there probably is. If those people could raise their hand. If you're here to speak on this item. Right. I'm not seeing any hands go up. I'm not seeing that we've got any emails either.
Okay. All right. Seeing that there is no one who wants to speak, we will then close the public meeting and bring this back to the commission to see if there's any discussion or questions for staff or the applicant from the commission. Okay, and I will see if anyone would be willing.
Have their hands raised.
Hey, this is John. I just wanted to mention, we've been testing that email address that you provided, Nick, just using personal email addresses, and we haven't gotten it to work. So I don't know if somebody is out there trying to provide a comment through email. I don't know that it's working. I'm wondering if maybe you could just use either my email address or Michaela's or yours instead. We want to broadcast that.
Sure. I don't care who's. I don't know. John, yours is easy to sell as anybody's.
Yeah, I agree. So if there's anybody that's on there, it's John.Anderson, so JOHN.ANDERSON at slcgov.com.
Okay, should we wait another minute or two for any emails to come in?
Yeah, let's give us a little bit. I'm going to have one of our staff people who's on test the raising their hand function too to make sure that's working.
Can we type John's address into the chat so people can actually see what it is? And I think I know it, but I don't want to get it wrong, so I'm not going to do it.
Nicholas,
I'm working.
Sarah's hand is raised, so that.
Okay. All right. I just
right now.
Yep. All right. Yeah, the hand function's working. So those staff members who did that, you can put your hands down. And I typed in John's email address into the Q&A section for those that want to be able to see that.
Great, thanks, Nick.
Yeah, okay. So it's not looking like any hands are up.
And John, have you received any emails? Maybe we can give it one more minute.
Oh,
yeah, I haven't received anything. And I know that, as Chrissy kind of mentioned, they haven't received a lot of public input on the project either. So I don't think we were expecting a lot, but certainly we can be patient.
I do have a hand that just came up. Brian Hobbs, I'm going to unmute you and you'll have 2 minutes.
Can you hear me, Nick?
We can hear you now.
All right. I was actually not really interested in this portion of the agenda. I just wanted to raise my hand so you could see that it's working. So
thank you.
For what it's worth.
That's great.
So
we got it.
I'll conclude my 2 minutes and turn it back over to you, Nick. How's that?
That's perfect. Thank you. And if you could put your hand down, that would be great too. All right. I'm still not seeing any hands, so.
Okay. I think I'll bring it back then to the commission for any discussion or questions, or if anyone is willing to entertain a motion.
So I raised my hand, but I don't know that it's working for us. I'm happy to make a motion. So
please do. And who is this speaking? I can't tell.
Amy.
Oh, thank you, Amy. Okay.
Motion, okay, based on the information in the staff report, the information presented and the input received during the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission approve petition PLN PCM 2020-00078 with the following conditions. 1, any modifications to the approved plans after the issuance of a building permit must be specifically requested by the applicant and approved by the Planning Division prior to execution. 2, the applicant shall comply with all other department division requirements.
I'll second that.
Okay. We have a motion by Amy. Was that a second by Brenda?
Yep.
Okay. Let's go down our roll call. Maureen.
Yes.
Amy.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Matt.
Yes.
Brenda.
Yes.
Sarah.
Yes.
Crystal.
Yes.
Great. Motion passes. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 2, the LE plan development and preliminary plat at approximately 347, 353, and 359 North 700 West. These are case numbers PLN SUB 2019-00963 and PLN SUB 2020-00169. And our presentation will be from Casey first.
All right, this is Casey. I assume somebody can hear me.
Yeah,
Okay,
we
great.
can hear you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to try to share my screen. Okay. So this is a plan development and a preliminary subdivision plat wrapped together. The address, the project is located on 700 West, immediately west of the freeway, I-15. There are 3 vacant lots, and the applicant seeks to combine those lots and develop it as a multifamily project. It would contain 24 units divided up into 4 different buildings. So this first slide to kind of give you a sense of the vicinity. And I'll go to the next slide. Again, kind of a vicinity map looking to the west. The project is outlined in yellow. Here is a panoramic of the site, currently vacant. To the right are some single-family homes. To the left is a multifamily development. Here's the site plan. As you can see, there are 4 separate building footprints. Each footprint contains 6 units for a total of 24 units, and each unit would constitute its own lot as proposed by a preliminary plat. The setbacks are all in compliance with the zoning for an RMF 35 zone. And let me state at this point that currently the property is zoned SR1. As you can see by this slide here, over on the right side, highlighted in red. Property is currently zoned SR1 and is being considered by the City Council to be changed to an RMF 35, which is residential multifamily 35 being the height limit. The council was scheduled to take action on this last night. They postponed action on changing the zoning because of the difficulty in receiving public comment. So the zoning has not been changed at this time. This proposal, this plan development, would be subject to that zoning being changed. Going back to the site plan, all the setbacks and building height are complied with. The building height is proposed at approximately 30 feet. The building height limit in the zone would be 35 feet. And the front setback, rear setbacks, and side setbacks are all met. On the north side, there's a required landscape buffer, and the applicant is meeting that requirement of a 10-foot landscape buffer with trees and shrubs and fencing. And you can see the trees on that north side. Here are the renderings of the building. You're looking at, on the left side of that is the front of the building that you would see from 700 West. The driveway would go down the middle and access garages on each of the buildings. 2-car garages, 3-level units. And then down here on the right of your screen is a better straight-on shot of the proposed building, at least the front of it. Here's the preliminary plat drawings showing each unit to have its own lot but none of the lots would front 700 West, which is one of the requirements that is being modified through the plan development. The other standard being modified is that there are 4 buildings intended for this one larger lot, and the code currently requires 1 building per lot. The applicant has tried to break up the building to allow for more green space and more light through the area. So with that, staff determined that the project complies with the standards for plan development and recommends the project be approved with the conditions listed in the staff report, specifically subject to the zoning change. So with that, I'll end my presentation.
Great. Thank you, Casey. Any questions for Casey at this point? I see Amy's raising her hand.
So, Casey, I have a couple of questions. How long ago did we see this one for the zone proposed recommendation?
The zone change went to the Planning Commission in November, the first meeting in November.
Okay. So I have a question regarding the changes we made, and I don't know if they're in effect yet, that gave planning staff the ability to approve certain parts. I can't remember if it was for plan developments, but we talked a lot about direction to planning staff regarding that frontage of the main street. And do you remember what I'm talking about?
Are you talking about this specific project or projects in general?
No, we had discussed in it, and it was approved. It was like a general approval given to staff now to make approvals of some aspects of projects so that they didn't come to the Planning Commission. And one of the sticking points we talked about was if you had adequate direction in writing about what would constitute approval from staff for street level frontage of like what that building is looking like. And I'm just wondering when that gets applied, did you apply it, or is it for something totally different? And maybe Nick can pipe in, because I have this memory of us doing it, but I can't remember the full context of how it was approved or what projects it was applicable for.
This is Nick. I think John Anderson might have some insight too.
Yeah, Harry, I think you might be talking about the proposed changes to the RMF 30 zones that we discussed a few months ago, which would have allowed a lot of these things to be done by right rather than through a plan development. So that was for the RMF 30 zones, and it actually hasn't been to the council yet. So that wouldn't apply in this situation.
Little memory jog. So I guess one thing I'm curious, Casey, is did you work with the applicant regarding what this thing looks like on 7th West? Because I'm not too thrilled with its engagement, and I don't know if you tried to work with them and they didn't make changes, or if you felt like it was meeting standards.
Okay, so they have made changes throughout the process. They've added the balcony and the different materials to create more interest. So yes, staff was of the opinion that the changes made were adequate, improved the design. So we're still recommending approval.
Any other questions for Casey?
Casey, this is Matt. I have a question for you. One of the standards that we're looking at discusses whether the scale, mass, and intensity of the plan development is kind of compatible with the neighborhood. And one of the issues that I raised when we upzone this area was that question whether the upzone was compatible, but I was overruled, I think, clearly in that sort of discussion. But to me, I mean, the rest of the zone seems to be much smaller than RMF 35 in general. And I'm just wondering if you could maybe dive a little bit deeper in your understanding, maybe you and I, about why you feel that this mass, scale, and intensity matches the character of the neighborhood, particularly the surrounding parcels that are zoned RMF 25 and the lower zones kind of around it. And how to really also really how to consider a zone that or project that's been in what has been a more intense zone, even though the neighboring zones are less intense. How you kind of have dealt with that mass and scale question.
So really, it's coming down to the potential that this can change to RMF 35, which it was zoned that way previously, approximately 20 years ago. The property to the south of it is zoned RMF 35 and has existing multifamily projects of about a similar height on it. This meets all the requirements for RMF 35, so it's really kind of assumed that if the zoning does change to RMF 35, then the dimensional requirements that are allowed by that zone would be compatible. So that the question is really answered at that point. So if this does get changed to RMF 35, then and this meets all the dimensional requirements, it's assumed that it's compatible size-wise. Now, relating to the properties to the north that are zoned single family, yeah, there's a question there that this would definitely mass-wise is bigger. The height is similar. A single family zone is allowed a building height of 28 feet, posed at approximately 30 feet, just less than 30 feet. Although granted, 28 feet is a pitched roof, where this is a flat roof. So yes, there would be more mass, but that is where the landscape buffer comes in. The code requires a 10-foot landscape buffer when you are up against a single family or residential type zone, with trees spaced so many feet, fencing, to allow for that increased distance and reduce the impact to them. So the code itself tries to work with that, and staff felt like the applicant has attempted to do that and comply with the code. So that's it.
So for staff, we're not modifying the height restrictions and the massing restrictions then. We're mainly just modifying, doing the subdivision and the kind of street facing stuff. We have all these standards that are listed in, for plan developments, attachment G in our staff report. And I'm wondering though how to interpret those if they comply outright with the underlying zone. Do we consider whether the standard or not applies when approving do we only consider the standard that's being modified, by seeking a plan development, or we consider all the standards that are normally considered when reviewing a plan development? Does that question make sense?
I think so, yes. So when someone applies for a plan development, it opens up the project to review against all the standards that are applicable, which there are plan development standards. So yeah, in the staff report, I go through those, I address those. But you're right, it's subject to all those standards.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Any other questions for Casey?
Yeah, this is John. I'm just curious about this street facing facade. Can you take us through that process a little bit of the approval of that? Is it something that we're requiring to create this amount of busyness on one facade that's so small just because it's applied to such a small building, or is it more of a architect's choice to add so much to the facade?
I'm not sure if you want me to respond to that now, or if you want the applicant to make the presentation. John is one of the applicants, and I can respond later.
Or John, is the question whether city staff directed the applicant to add additional design elements to the facade to increase engagement with the street?
That's where I was headed with the question,
Yeah.
but I do see this a lot on these smaller facades where we're trying to put standards from much larger buildings onto smaller facades, and then it creates a bit of a nightmare of a facade. So after the second presentation, we can return to this question. That's fine.
I also have this question. I agree with John on this particular issue. We'd like to explore this more.
Okay. Any other questions for Casey at this point? All right, I've scrolled through my video feed. I'm not seeing any others. Okay, thank you, Casey. We'd like to hear now from the applicant.
You guys hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Quick question. Sorry for the technical question, but how can I share my screen? Is there a way?
Is this John?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, John, I just gave you control.
Okay.
So on the top of your screen in the menu bar, there's a tab called Share.
Perfect. Okay.
There we go.
You guys see that? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So here, let me first, just before I get into this, let me address the street-facing facade with you guys. So going through this, I think a lot of you are probably fairly familiar with some of our other developments downtown. We definitely push a more modern aesthetic. We are ones that I know that for some people, stucco is a four-letter word. We actually like stucco for its cleanliness and modern aesthetic. Before this, we actually had a lot more stucco on the street facing, and through working with staff, they wanted us to push a little bit more durable materials, hence where we brought in the lap siding, the black lap siding. So here's kind of a call out of all the materials. You know, we're open to cleaning this up and making it a little bit more sophisticated. We would personally like to maybe make it more simplified. The things that we really wanted to focus on was the porch on grade, so that you're on the same eye level as passerbys that are walking down the street. We also wanted to, where that level 2 balcony is, that is the main living space, the kitchen, living, dining area. So, you know, and then we've added a lot of other windows. So, you know, we're open to working with you guys on that.
Hanging out on the front lawn, and they're all like 3 feet apart from each other. It's like,
I'm sorry, what was that?
okay.
I think someone might just be unmuted, but I would just go ahead and do the rest of the presentation, and we'll return to questions at the end.
Okay, sounds good. So as you can see, we've, you know, looking at this site, when we started looking through, you know, this parcel land being changed to RMF 35 to match the existing zoning of the apartment complex to the south. You know, we're essentially, you know, predominantly this site is surrounded by RMF 35. So that's why we felt like there was a justification to rezone this to RMF 35. We started looking at, you know, if we were following the strict RMF 35 multifamily guidelines, we could essentially build 2 buildings like I'm showing, with drive aisle down the center with tuck under car parking. Doing so would make it so that your only pedestrian interaction would be facing 700 West, where tenants would either go into an internal corridor from the tuck under parking or come into the building straight from 7th West. if we maxed out the site footprint to the 10-foot side yards, it would make it so that the small green space in the rear could probably only be accessed through the building. So we would essentially be cutting up the site, and which would reduce in less pedestrian interaction. So we wanted to look at, splitting this up into 4 separate buildings, and from our Alta survey, calculating the max density per this zone, which is 30 units per acre. We're at 0.94 acres, so we could go up to 28 units. However, we are looking at this being a for sale project where we want to provide home ownership in this area. And in doing so, we want to focus more on the site quality versus trying to put in as many units as possible. So we reduced down to 24 units to provide a larger landscape buffer on the side yards where the front doors are, as well as provide a larger green space in the rear of the property, so that these, we kind of have a tagline, we try to create communities within communities. We wanted to create just a small green space / pocket park for these tenants with a decent sized side yard that can pull them through by the front doors to pull pedestrian activity back into the site. And so in doing that, I want to thank Casey. Casey was great to work with. We pushed back and forth, but he was great. His attention to detail and patience with us was great. We going through this, working with him, he mentioned a lot of the items, discussed, that we only needed to do a 10-foot landscape buffer along the north, but we wanted to push that to 12 feet. We always install more mature trees than the code asked for, and we wanted to have great site circulation so that as people, even though you're walking off the street, we wanted to push that pedestrian interaction throughout the entire site so that the entire site was activated instead of just the front yard setback. Also, as you can see here, along on the right-hand side, those street-facing units that I kind of started with, they do have an on-grade patio so that people can sit out there, interact with passerbys that are walking just by the side on the public sidewalk. We believe strongly in eyes on the street, and we try to do that, and we try to really up that by giving eyes on every part of the site. And as you can see, breaking up the building and reducing unit count, our building pad is only 40% of the site, where we could have done it to 60%. And I mentioned that we're only proposing 24 units instead of 28. Here's a couple other renderings. We kind of dressed the one on the left. That's the street-facing unit. And also, as you walk down this, the side yards where the front doors are, we look at fully landscaping these with trees and perennials that are drought tolerant, as well as grass, so that there is a green belt that surrounds this development to just kind of spark that pedestrian activity. And that's kind of all I have. So let me know if you have any questions.
Great, thank you. We have questions for the applicant.
Yeah, I have a question. So concerning your green space in the front yard that you're talking about here in the front setback, there is a tree lawn, then there's a sidewalk, then there's a large sort of front setback. So we don't really have a landscape plan that shows what you're doing with that. We do have some indication of trees in the front yard setback, but that's not what you showed in the rendering just now. So how do we know what we're getting?
So we hid the trees in the front just so you could actually see the building. But we are planning, per the drawings in your staff report, there will be 4 trees installed in the front yard. So,
in the front yard setback, but not in the tree lawn.
No, we'd be within the front yard setback.
So can we get some trees in the tree lawn too? Because this street has a quality having trees along it pretty thickly. So I know that your property now, the trees are not healthy. I was out there
Yeah.
so sort of reviving the tree lawn trees as a
And
part of a neighborhood.
And Brenda, I just want to make sure I'm 100% understanding. When you say tree lawn, you mean the park strip?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Some people call it tree lawn, some people call it park strip.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure. So would you propose we move these 4 trees into the tree lawn, or do trees in addition to these trees in the front
I'd
yard?
like to see trees in addition, so you could then do smaller trees within the front yard, or either way, whichever way seems to work better. But I know even in the apartment next door, which is apartment complex next door, which is not for sale, it's a more affordable unit. There are very mature trees which make the project look really, much more human. So that's an important part of it.
Yeah, I agree. And as since you went to the site, you could see that there was a lot of trees on site. We have done through our survey, we have done a thorough inventory of the trees. And so, trees that they're all pretty overgrown. And so we do have a plan that if there's trees we can keep and prune back to make them healthy again, we will plan on doing that.
The other question I have for you regarding landscape is the rear landscape area. You've decided not to do anything but just turf back there? No trees, no nothing?
Based off our experience with our past developments that we've had, we have programmed those out quite a bit more. And through cell surveys and talking to people that have now been living there for over a year plus, people love their animals, especially their dogs. And they have asked us, like, we wish this would just be more wide open so that we could, either our kids can play back there or our dogs. And so right now, in a way, it is a little unprogrammed space that could be kind of multi-purpose with how the residents would like to use it.
Okay, thank you.
So
Thanks, Brenda. Any other questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I'll jump back in with the facade.
Okay.
I think your presentation came down, but I'm looking at one of the elevations.
Here, I can put it back up if you'd like.
That might be easier. That way everyone can see. So that part of my question is, how much of this is kind of what your intent was versus how much of this is our standards for the city? Because I'll be honest, I am an architect as well. I'm a more contemporary architect, and I've had similar instances where try to do a simple, elegant building, and then it ends up with a lot of things that were unintended. So I'd like to know more about what the goal was and then where we ended up.
Yeah, there was a little bit of that. Like, I can understand. So one thing here, we are striving to make this a good, affordable project that kind of matches the home values of the area. There was a comment by staff that they didn't want to see any stucco that faced the street. And we just said, like I kind of started with, we don't, when we use stucco, we don't use it to say we want to save money. We use it intentionally because we do like the modern aesthetic. We do understand that there is a little bit of a stigma for it. And so kind of a middle ground working with staff is we kind of went to them and said, look, we want to keep it predominantly the filled material stucco, but what if we incorporated these bands of smooth lap siding to give a little bit more haptic interest to the street-facing facade? And so it was a little bit of a compromise from all parties, I'd say. So that's kind of how we ended where we did.
So So basically the idea, the changes that you did were to add another kind of material to the project in response to the planners. Is that
Yes.
correct? Because otherwise you added what the fiber cement lap siding, where before you had stucco or ephes.
Yeah, that's correct. And
Okay, so the black, what's black in this rendering is that lap siding, and that would have been white or would have just been painted black?
it would have been white, but through changing to make this work, we ended up tweaking the facade more to make it feel a little bit more intentional versus just tacking it on. So it's hard to say the previous rendition was this minus the lap siding.
Yes.
So,
And I understand how things change, yes.
yeah, because you're an architect, so it's for simplicity, I'll answer saying yes, but it wasn't quite that simple.
Okay.
And on my end, I think what I don't like to see on smaller facades is so many changes in material and changes in kind of the in and out. This floating rectangle, I think, is probably my bigger concern. If that was grounded some way, where maybe that whole gray area came to the ground and maybe created a portal or some way of entry, but didn't feel like it was floating, and then adding everything underneath, which I think is just kind of chopped up and a little distracting. Maybe even adding the black to the bottom to add some weight to it. I just feel like that floating element it feels a little tacked on to me.
Okay.
So I just wasn't sure where that came from, if that was an original part of the intent, or if that was something we had to add to get that 5-foot relief that I know that we have to do in certain zones.
I agree with John. I think that there's just too much going on here. I mean, I think that's maybe also true on the side, on what we're calling the front facade, which is kind of a funky little facade too, where there just seems to be a lot of it's striped in a vertical fashion, which I still don't understand that tendency. And again, 3 different materials, 4 different materials is just a little bit too much for a project like this. So, especially in the front facade.
I can jump back in. I mean, I think even that front facade, if you were to go back to the stucco and get rid of that L, and then if you were to make the black or that kind of floating rectangle black that came all the way down, that would feel more grounded to me and more intentional. You could keep the same form roughly, but I think just kind of grounding that more and doing 2 materials instead of 3 might clean it up a little bit. I don't know what your thoughts, if you guys tried that.
Yeah, we would welcome the kind of permission to simplify it a little bit and kind of refine the material palette, if you will.
Yeah,
We'd like to.
Because I agree with you. I think stucco done well is really great, and stucco done poorly is really awful. So, if you can keep the level of finish where it needs to be for it to be correct, then I think that's more acceptable to me personally. But I think that would be more of a trade-off that I would be willing to make versus just adding more materials just because.
I would say, like, we need to simplify it. I wouldn't, give any specifics there. I would actually tend to bring the panels, the fiber cement panels down to the ground instead of having stucco there. So, whichever way you want to go, whatever.
Yeah. No,
whatever simplification you can do to this, it's just a little too busy for the street front right now for this kind of a project. We're seeing a lot of busyness. I guess that's why John and I are asking, if this is something that's an architectural trend we're missing, or is it or it's something that's that's coming out of our guidelines.
Yeah, because yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, I think I can see a little bit of it's coming from guidelines. I think, I think staff is, they're following the guidelines, and I know that in a lot of your zones, stucco is very frowned upon, and so I think when they see a predominantly dominant stucco facade, that it kind of throws up red flags for them. So I can, when they're viewing it under the context of some of the zoning ordinance, I can understand that. So a little bit, I'd say a lot of the busyness is kind of driven by that, trying to kind of meet in the middle, because I agree, we tend to like to do things a little bit more simplified and sophisticated instead of throw multiple materials at it. So we would welcome the idea of kind of simplifying, doing, as Jonathan says, doing stucco well, and kind of readdress a few of these facades.
One more comment for these two renderings you have open. Is another way to simplify it would be maybe getting rid of the stucco that's underneath the L shape and to the side of the L shape, and keeping the stucco more like it is on the right image, where it's more of a border.
Yep.
That might be another way to simplify, and maybe even just doing that and bringing that gray panel to the ground. I don't have specific options, but I think just looking at it briefly, those types of things could make a difference. I would also ask the same question on the right image. Is there a reason there's 3 materials inside each one of those portals that you've created? Is that a standard that you're following, or is that a design decision?
No, that was just to add a little bit more depth to the facade, but
okay,
we could simplify down to 2 materials easily with just the stucco surround.
Because I could almost see like those surrounds being a way to change material versus it just happening inside so many times.
Yeah.
Because just being black and white, that it's like I say, it's tricky, but I just think simplifying is usually better when it comes to design.
I completely agree.
So.
Okay, well, thank you for the insight. I appreciate it.
Any other comments or questions for the applicant? Okay. Not seeing any. So thank you for your presentation and the discussion. Next,
Chairman
we'll
Bell,
move
this is
on.
Casey.
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify.
Oh, hey, Casey.
There were a couple of questions brought up. Commissioner Scheer asked about the trees. The plans show 4 trees in the park strip. So
They do?
yes, so the 4 trees that are shown.
What page is that on in the staff report? Do you know, Casey?
Looking here.
Sorry. Because I do see a site plan, but it doesn't even go out to the street edge. It just goes to the back of sidewalk.
Page 10 and 11 are the tree plans.
Okay, there's page 10. Okay, oh, I see. All right, thank you. Thank you. That's helpful. Okay.
And then I just want to, as far as a reference on the changes throughout the design changes on the front, I'm just going to put up what was originally submitted so you can kind of see the transition. And although stucco was a concern, it wasn't the main concern. It was more trying to engage that corner or that facade.
Yeah.
So let's see here. Oh, I'm not participant, so I can't share my screen, but I'll do that maybe later, or go ahead and carry on.
Okay, so maybe after the public comment portion, we'll come back to the facades.
Yeah, let's
Okay.
do that. I want to hear from the public
Okay.
anyway. This
Okay,
may not be a
we
big
will
issue.
now, yes, we will now move on to the public comments portion of the meeting. A couple of points I'd like to make before we start, just to reiterate what Casey mentioned during his report. We're here tonight to evaluate the plan development application and the subdivision plat, and our focus in evaluating those proposals is to consider the standards that are in the staff report and in the code. And those standards speak to such issues as consistency with the city's adopted policies and plans, and compatibility in terms of height and density and setbacks and landscaping with the surrounding area. The city council obviously has discretion when making a decision whether to approve or deny a rezoning petition. They have a lot more discretion to make that decision, and that's not what's before us tonight. So I just want to reiterate that point, and to ask that or suggest that, you know, comments that speak to the issues that are before us are the most helpful when we're formulating our discussion and our decision on these two applications. And I just wanted to point that out again before we go to the public hearing portion of the meeting tonight. So I'll open the public hearing, and first I'll ask to see if there's anyone here from the Community Council who would like to speak.
Just to remind folks, if you do want to speak, raise your hand digitally. There's an icon in the program that allows you to indicate that you want to speak.
You can also type in that you want to speak into the Q&A section as well. And just so everyone knows, we do have that email address up and working at this point. So if you wanted to send comments to finding.comments@slcgov.com, it works as well.
Great. Okay. So is no one here from the Community Council that we can tell?
It does not look like anybody has indicated that they wish to speak on this item.
Okay. And there are no individuals who wish to speak. Is that correct?
It does not appear to be that way.
There is one attendee that's got Thomas Rivera as a question somehow. You guys seeing that? Is it just me seeing that?
Yeah, there is he did ask a question. Well, he made a comment about the project looking pretty cheap. I asked him if he wanted to speak on it, and he said no.
Okay. Since there's no one who wishes to speak, I will now close the public meeting and bring this back to the commission for discussion.
There's
Perhaps
also
we
all these
can look.
people in the channel, the attendee lists that have exclamation marks by their name. What's that mean? Oh, attentiveness, if they're paying attention.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know if you really want to know what it means. I think it just means that their computer's been idle, so they're probably just sitting and watching, and they haven't done anything else.
Got it. All right. Thanks. Sorry, everybody.
No, thank you. We can go back to Casey, and perhaps we can walk through the facades and the changes from the original plan to the current proposal.
Casey, I've given you the ability to share your screen again.
Okay. So this is down on the left, you'll see what the original plan was. So there was some concern about stucco, but also kind of a concern about just adding more features to it. So as you can tell, the applicant added the balcony, a front entrance there. We did get to the point where it is now with those multiple materials, trying to increase the interest, and maybe that was too far, but just kind of to give you a sense of where we've come from.
That's the wrong facade.
As I say, that's a completely blank facade. Is that?
That's the garage facade. We'd like to see the front facade.
So there it is on the rendering.
Still the
I think that's the back.
Yeah, that's the back.
That's the back.
Oh, yeah, it's just white.
It's nothing.
So this is the front originally.
Okay, so they didn't have any front-facing facade.
Right. So we're trying to work with that to improve that.
Well, you did that. That's a big improvement. I must
Yeah.
say. Okay.
Okay. I'll.
Yeah. If we could just find somewhere in the middle, I think we'd be in a good spot.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm. Okay. I have another
Okay.
question for you. I'm sorry, Casey, which is the police department report asks for specific kinds of fencing along the sides of the property in particular, and maybe the back as well. And also they're concerned about the gap between the two buildings because there's no windows. I would be concerned about that as well, for safety reasons and also for design reasons, but certainly for safety reasons, the gap between the two buildings, there should be some windows if there are not on that facade.
And that is kind of a requirement. Well, not a requirement, but there were suggestions from the police department. So those certainly could be made a condition if the commission saw fit to do that.
And is there enough space between the two buildings to do that? Because you have to have a minimum of, John, what is it, 8 feet to be able to do that?
Yeah, I think it's a fire hazard issue having windows that close. So yeah, we'd have to check that requirement and make sure they're far enough apart.
So this is the John with City of Urban. So they're 10 feet apart, so we can have some openness, and we do have some windows there. We have the top and bottom of the stairs, so there's actually quite a bit of view down into that 10-foot
Okay,
alleyway.
that's good. That's good. We just weren't seeing that, so that's good. Well, maybe we missed it.
I think it's on page 16 of the staff report. It looks like that's the elevation that's
of the side yard.
if I'm reading it right. In
Yeah.
between the buildings.
Yeah, that looks
And
correct.
then you can kind of see it up on 14. You can see the upper story windows. So, okay.
Okay. Oh, yeah, you're
Is
right.
there other?
Page 16, right.
You see that? You see
Yep.
it there?
Yep. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. And also, I am also concerned about the fencing on the side because we're talking about for whatever reason, and I'm suspecting it's because of the narrowness of the lot, having those units have their front entrance facing the side, facing a fairly narrow, even though it's not as narrow as it, could have been. It's still a fairly narrow side yard of only 12 feet, which means the quality of that fencing is really what you're going to be sort of, that's going to define that quality of that space. So are you I mean, you do have landscaping there and you have, so what is the fence and material, and assuming you are going to build a fence there?
We're planning on doing, it's kind of noted there, it's a 6-foot privacy fence that will run along the side yards and the rear yard.
Okay, so the police department is asking for that fence not to be to have some transparency, so that whatever is happening in the vacant lots next door, and maybe they're referring to the rear yard as vacant. Don't know.
It doesn't look like anything is vacant next door.
Yeah, I think we're filling up the rest of the vacant space.
I think the north lots are residential. That might be where they want to create separation, so you're not looking into people's backyard.
Are people's backyards, so.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. In which case a privacy fence would probably be more appropriate. I also, if I may, I want to note for the discussion of the Planning Commission that there was a petition signed by many, many people on this project, against this project, which I assume is one of the reasons why the City Council made the decision to table this discussion until people could arrive. I just want to make sure everybody saw that in terms of the consideration. And I know not being affordable sometimes is there's a lot of things that people say when they say this project is too, when they really want to say this project is too dense for our neighborhood.
So I don't know.
And the commission should know that what's before us is subject to the approval of the rezone. So if the city council approves the rezone, and if we approve the applications before us, then they would be approved. If the city council elects not to approve the rezone, then even if we approve this tonight, it would have no effect, as that's a condition to our approval, or a condition precedent to our approval.
Madam
So,
Chair,
okay.
this is Nick. Can I make a quick comment?
Sure.
So we did receive 2 emails that came in after your planning commissions were posted and made public, or planning staff reports were made public. And I just want to, because the public hasn't seen those or heard those, I just wanted to read those into the record.
That'd be great. Thanks.
This first email is from an Elizabeth Estrada Murillo. It says, hello, I'm a current resident of Rose Park and have been for the last 10 plus years. I have seen my peers, friends, and loved ones being displaced by the long-term effect of redlining and what has developed to gentrification. Rent will be raised if this development plan continues, and low-income folks will be displaced. What we need is affordable housing. Please take the folks that have been living here or living there for years into consideration. And then the other comment received was from a Daniel Sutherland, who wrote, I urge you to stop development that hurts Rose Park residents, in parentheses, Ely, or Ellie, however you say that, and instead invest more into affordable housing. And that's it.
Great. Thank you, Nick.
This is John, the presenter. Can I respond to those, or do you guys need to chat first?
I think we'll discuss among the commission, and if we have any additional questions, we can reach back out. Is there any other discussion among the commissioners? Any other issues you want to address? Questions we need to ask? Thoughts you want to share?
I'm ready to make
Sarah?
a motion, but I'm a little nervous doing that since I think Brenda and John might have some conditions. And so I'm ready. You know, do you guys want me to do it and then you guys can kind of help add your conditions, or do you want to let me know what conditions you want to add? Then I'll make the motion, or do you guys want to just make the motion?
I think we still need to hold the public hearing.
Oh, I thought we did that.
We held the public hearing.
We talked about how many people were unattentive when I looked at that up.
So to recap, the comments from Brenda and John had to do with the street-facing facade and the recommendation that the applicant simplify the material list and refine the facade design per, the discussion held during the Planning Commission hearing. Is there more to it than that?
No, I don't think we should be more specific than that. I think that does it. And have staff review and, make the final determination.
Yeah, I agree. I think as long as it gets simplified and cleaned up a little bit to reduce the number of materials, I think we would all be happy with that.
So if I just say we to have the project simplify its materials as approved by staff. Will that be a fine condition for you guys?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm going to make if I can find on my computer where my notes went.
And while you're looking for those, I mean, am I the only one that has a issue with C, the scale, mass, and intensity of the development being compatible with the neighborhood? Sounds like it.
So is your concern there, is your concern, Matt, with the adjacent residential, the single family to the north?
When this went through the zoning, I think I was also the lone no vote. I mean, I actually like CW and think I like a lot of the projects they do. I didn't really support the rezone. I felt like there was always this need to have kind of a breakdown between the single family residence and this more higher intensity stuff. Otherwise, we're just going to be rezoning that whole area to RMF 35. And I was overruled there. That's that's the way it goes. 6-1 because I looked up the meeting minutes, so it wasn't even close. so I know I'm falling on a sword here, but I mean, again, I still feel like you have those residential properties. I think, we rezoned it to allow for a higher intense use. I mean, and that rezone clearly has come through.
Well, just to clarify, the rezoning is pending. It's not yet been approved. So.
Right. And I would just throw out that, the center of the block really is a higher density. And those 3 lots are such an odd shape. It would be very difficult to break that into something reasonable for someone to use or to purchase. And so I do think it's a good use for the site as it stands. We do need more density in our city. We have a housing shortage, and you would think if we were to build enough housing that would reduce the price of housing because people have to go someplace. So I find it reasonable that it does square off that zone fairly cleanly, and it creates a place where we can actually use this lot instead of having it be abandoned and untaken care of, which I think is more of an eyesore. It's not like it's a park or anything useful.
Yeah, I agree. There's an eyesore for sure.
Okay. All right. Since we've shut Matt down, I'm going to make a motion. Based on the information, the staff report, the information presented, and the input received during the public hearing, I move that the commission approve the LE Plan Development PLN SUB 2019-00963. And let's see, I think I'm doing the wrong one. Hang on, I'm almost close. And preliminary subdivision plat PLN SUB 2020-00169 with the following conditions. we ask that they simplify the materials on the outside, and we want all of that to be approved by staff.
Sarah, this is Paul. Can you be a little more specific on simplify the materials on the outside?
No, I cannot. But maybe we can get some insights from the architects who have strong opinions on this.
My opinion is if we could reduce the way that it's broken up, where you have stucco, cement board, stucco, cement board, and then underneath that cement board and more stucco, that's just a lot of transitioning. If you could go stucco, cement board, and then that gray cement board all the way to the ground, that's an option. I think there's a lot of solutions. Just reducing the busyness of it. Even mimicking the stucco portals that are on the sides, on the front, and then having the infill be something more simplified. That's kind of what I'm getting at when I say simplify. I don't know if that helps you.
What if we say
So
simplify?
in terms of the motion, can we go with the language I had originally, simplify the material list and refine the facade design per the comments provided from the commission during the planning commission hearing with final approval delegated to staff? Paul, does that work?
Yeah, sorry. I was watching Brenda talk with her microphone off. I don't know if she was trying to say something. Maybe she was just muttering at me. I don't know.
I like it. What Adrian said is, I think, appropriate and certainly interpretable because the applicant can go back and listen to the comments.
Right.
Okay, that's fine. We have some
That work,
specificity
Paul?
there.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes. Yes. Now we need a
Okay.
second.
Yeah, we've got a motion by Sarah.
I'll second.
Second by Brenda. Okay, we will go reverse order. Crystal,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Brenda,
Yes.
Matt,
No.
John,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Maureen.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 6-1. Is that right? Yeah, that is right. Okay. Thank you all. Next item on the agenda is the Salt Lake Crossing Design Review at approximately 470 West, 200 North, case number PLN PCM 2019-01106. And Brenda will take over as I am recusing myself due to a potential conflict of interest.
I also need to recuse myself for potential conflict of interest as well.
Does that leave us with a quorum, Nick?
Let's see. Let me count faces here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We lose 2. That leaves us 6. We have 11 appointed commissioners, so we still have a quorum.
Terrific. So this item will be presented by Nanette.
That's right. And I am sharing my screen. All right, are you able to see my presentation?
Yes.
Great. So the applicant with Salt Development is requesting a design review to allow for modification to design standards for their Salt Lake Crossing project. The project is a proposed mixed-use development, which will include 150 micro and 150 studio residential units with co-working space, a gym, a clubhouse, and a coffee shop located on the ground floor. The project site is located at 470 West, 200 North in the TSA UCC zoning district and has two frontages along two public streets on 200 North and 490 West. While pedestrian use is limited in the area presently, the project site is also in an area that's developing for increased pedestrian use. Originally, the project came in as a TSA development score review. The Salt Lake Crossing project met the criteria for an administrative review, but it was found by staff to not meet the required design guidelines along the 490 West frontage in the TSA zoning district. The Planning Commission previously heard this request on February 26th and provided to the applicant and staff direction on the design review. The design review requested modifications are shown on the presentation and includes the modification to the maximum length of a building facade facing a public street, modification to the required amount of active ground floor uses, and the amount of visual interest along the frontage, modification to the amount of ground floor glass, and a modification to the number of building entrances along 490 West. The first design modification proposed by the applicant is the maximum length of the building facade on 490 West. The design standard allows a maximum width of 200 feet. The requested modification is for a 450-foot building length. The purpose of creating a maximum building facade length is to break up large expanses of building. While the facade length exceeds the maximum length of the design standard, it's staff's opinion that the project meets the intent in that the vertical columns, in between the vertical columns is an open courtyard, which will break up the expanse of the building. The active ground floor use and visual interest is also being requested to be modified. The design standard requires that at least 60% of the ground floor use is an active use other than parking. This active use must extend 25 feet into the building. This standard also requires that the ground floor provide at least 25% visual interest. The Salt Lake Crossing project is proposing 18% active ground floor use, and it will enhance visual interest by providing space for art displays near the entrances to the building along 490 West. Salt Development has been working with local and youth artists in occupying these art display spaces. The project will also provide green walls and seating areas along 490 West. In February, Planning Commission heard a work session of this project to direct planning staff and the applicant on the design of the project. One of the topics of discussion and an overall concern with the design of these green walls. The applicant has addressed this concern by increasing the depth of these green walls by 3 feet. The applicant is also requesting a modification to the ground floor glass with a proposed 32% of ground floor glass. The majority of this glass houses the art displays along 490 West. The final request is to allow for a modification to building entrances. The requirement is one building entrance for every 40 feet of frontage. The proposal is for 80 feet in between each building entrance. The placement of these building entrances is staff feels is appropriate as it connects the design of the upper floors to the building to the ground floor. Further, the modification to the glass standard is also considered appropriate as the fenestration provided on the building provides for visual interest and is positioned toward the pedestrian. So it's staff's opinion that overall the project meets the intent of the zoning district and the design review standards of the TSA UCC zoning district. And staff is recommending approval of the design review for Salt Lake Crossing with the 4 conditions listed in the staff report. And that is the end of my presentation for Salt Lake Crossing.
Hey, Brenda, it looked like you might have been saying something and you were on mute.
Yeah, okay. So is the applicant here? And can we give control of the meeting to the applicant?
We are here. This is Ethan. Can you hear me?
Yes?
All right. Now to answer your second question, let's try.
Ethan, there we go.
All right. Hey, that worked. I think.
Yep.
All right. You seeing this?
Yes, we see it.
All right. So I'll be brief on part of this since I know you're somewhat familiar with the project, given our working session last month or in February. And just looking at hardware district, if I can just change. This is just context of the neighborhood. Our project being this in the corner here, some of the other apartment buildings that we put around. So, you know, we know our neighbors decently here. We're trying hard to create a district. We're trying to do something meaningful in this area. And we think this project is a key component to that. It's a new type of apartment building. It combines the co-working type of environment with co-living, with micro units and studios. This front building, has the coffee shop in the lower portion here in our lobby. This contains a few levels of office, a level of gym, and some clubhouse function. Now, just to cut to the chase, since our last meeting, our primary concern is this area back here on the bottom left of the screen along 490 West, which is where all the buses come and the tracks are immediately adjacent to the west there. When we spoke last, just to give you some context where we started on this facade, this is what it used to look like, right? A little barren and stark, right? And so there were some comments about trying to make this, give it more depth, give it more interest. This is where we've landed. We've created these little pocket parks. We've pushed these in further to give it more depth, to accentuate the building lines coming down so it feels like more of a break than it did before. And giving a little more attention to the detailing of the landscaping and how the vines interact with these columns, which we planted a tree. We don't have a lot of room for trees, so we're really incorporating that into the architecture as well. Just another view of the same, so you get an idea of what the depth is along that walk along 490 West. So each of these has similar characteristics: the tree planters, the benches, planter, and the vine wall. This goes into the garage beyond, and that's kind of the piece that we're discussing. As I back up, you can see these pocket parks, the land between the buildings. And below the building, at the base of the building itself, we're creating the art niches, right? And we're actually pretty excited about that. I am, at least. The opportunity that we have to have something that's more interactive with the public. We like events, and so we're excited about the type of events we could have there. Just backing up, and for anybody that's new to this project, this is the elevation along 490 West, which backs up to the front runner tracks and the bus stops along here. So on the far right of the screen is our amenity building, and that's an all concrete structure. We're breaking the inside and out of that and putting a lot of detail into that. That piece is right at the intersection that leads to the front runner, to access the front runner platform. And so that's where the coffee shop lands. That's where our lobby lands. A lot of action, and we're putting some seating areas for the coffee shop out on the street with little planters to give them, to define their space a little bit. And then moving to the north, this is where all the residence units happen. This is all studio and micro units. Being TSA Urban Core, we thought this is really an ideal spot to push the density a little bit. And we have 150 micro units and 150 studio units, and they're actually really cool units. Pretty excited about that, but we won't get into that. And the primary concern with the planning department was this lower facade down here, which is a podium of parking. Given the constraints of the site, we have one level of parking above, and then we've gone down with another level into the water table down there. But we've put a lot of effort into this facade, working with the planning department and from our working session last time. This is, a little view of the seating areas in front of the coffee shop. trying to activate that corner, giving it a mixed use component. Just a view of what the inside of that south building will look like. This would be filled with office space, with gym. And then it has a roof deck on top, hot tub, fire pits, the whole bit. We like to have a little fun. A close-up of the art niches, what those will look like. So they'll be about 3 feet deep, so we can actually walk in there, hang art, and they'll be lit at night, and trying to create little moments of pause along that walkway. We love to have events at our projects. That's kind of what makes our projects unique in a way, is the community that we create. And so we're excited about the potential of using this street. It's a really wide street, actually. So we're excited about the opportunity of getting it on the gallery stroll. And we actually have murals in our nearby buildings and lots of display areas in those as well. And so we think this could be a pretty hot area just to take over the street on occasion. So that's in the plan. We're working with A Gallery and West High School for the artwork. For the very extreme north end, that's our dog park, or our dog wash, which will be probably the nicest dog wash you've ever seen. And that's catty corner. Just behind us in this rendering is our dog park. And just another view of those little parklets, the seating areas. So that's the project in a nutshell. I can go deeper into more detail, but I didn't want to rehash it too much, given that some of the familiarity that you have with it. But this really is a new product type that we're bringing on, and we're really focusing on the social rather than a car oriented. We're only parking about 50% or 0.5 per unit stalls, 0.5 stalls per unit. We have public parking in there as well for the coffee shop and for the office space as well. And that's it in a nutshell. I'm interested to hear your comments and see if we've addressed your concerns from last time as well.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for the staff or for the applicant at this point? Okay.
I do.
Okay.
What is?
Whose eye you do?
I couldn't tell.
Is that Crystal?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
The material around the art pockets. I couldn't tell from the Dropbox. What is that?
Sure. Well, let me go to a view of that. So that is actually, it's a 4-inch high split face CMU block. There's two dark colors that we're using, and then precast that frames these pieces, precast that caps it, precast that frames all the entries, and then some iron elements in there as well.
Is that like a stone?
It's a split face CMU block. So, there's bad CMU block and there's good CMU block, but it's basically like a large brick, if you will. Something that has more of a modular character like that, but it has a little bit of a stone look because of the way it's split like that.
Where I'm getting stuck is how different the co-working space is from the rest.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that material right there would be a place to connect them.
Sure, that was intentional. That was very intentional, actually, to break that apart from the residences. And if you look at some of our buildings, just to the south that face this, we've worked hard to bring a historical context to this neighborhood and to give it some variety as well. And so this building, where it's a different function, it's a different product type, we wanted it to feel different than the rest of the project. And so if you're back, to the north is where people live, and this is where people are working. This is where people are going to the gym. It has very tall floor-to-floor spaces. And it's meant to look like an older building where the rest is meant to look very new.
I like that aspect of it. It's just, for me, it's very busy, the contrast. I am the new guy.
Well, I think it might be okay to be a contrast because there are different uses, and And also, it is already in a really long facade. I mean, that's been a problem we've had from the beginning. And so having something different is more like having a city where things are built not all at the same time and not all the same way, I think.
Yeah, exactly. That's the frame of mind we had, Brenda.
So does anybody else have comments, or Crystal, you have any others? Because you're the one who actually hasn't seen this. We saw it in a work session, but the public has also not, well, the public was invited to that, but in general, the public hasn't seen this one, so.
I personally would just love to see a little more of the brick.
More what? Sorry again?
The brick?
Oh, yeah. So how much of this project is brick? Ethan?
Yeah, currently this front building, what we call the crossing building, that is the brick building. And let me just jump back to an elevation if I can here. Here we go. And so the other portions that are meant to look more modern, they're very intentionally modern. That's where we're bringing in the wood and the glass. You can see we're putting a lot of glass in this compared to what you normally see on an apartment building, right? Keep in mind, this is an apartment building at the end of the day. You know, contrasted to some of the others we've seen, but trying to bring the butterfly roofs in and the glass and the wood, trying to give this a really unique character where the front building is meant to look like an older building, like it's always been there. So we really feel these should contrast rather than trying to blend them together.
Anyone else have questions for staff or for the applicant? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open up the public meeting. Is there anyone from the neighborhood council who would like to speak? If so, you can raise your hand. I'm not able to see that, but somebody is.
I'm checking. I don't see any hands going up, but let's give people a moment to try to find that button. We have not received any emails on this item as of yet.
Okay.
And there doesn't appear to be any Q&A entered for people indicating that they want to speak.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak who's not on the community council?
We just had a hand go up.
Okay.
So I'm going to unmute Brian Hobbs.
Okay. Brian, you're up. Brian? Mr. Hobbs? Can you hear me?
Hang on, he's in here twice, I think. Brian, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Yes.
I had to log off and come back on. That was probably it. So I'm with Salt Development as well. Ethan and I attended the community council a few weeks ago. And if nobody was here from the community council, I just wanted to give a little flavor or color from how that meeting went. Ethan and I walked through many of the same renderings, even though we've reworked some of the additional details following conversations with Nanette and her team. But the community council traditionally for West Capitol and the Marmalade area has been a very fairly rigid community council where they care quite a bit about what's going into their neighborhood. And after our presentation, I was surprised, and we've been to many community council meetings on past projects. I was surprised at the number of individuals that came up and thanked us for trying to put something historical, something elegant, some good architecture into their neighborhood. We actually didn't hear a single negative comment in that community council, which frankly surprised us. So a little bit of commentary there. Ethan, maybe you can chime in and give some additional details, but we did spend a lot of time with the community council a few weeks ago.
Before Ethan goes in, let's see if there's any other public comments, please. Mm,
I am not seeing any other hands go up.
Okay, seeing no additional comments, I'm going to close the public meeting and open it up to discussion with the commission.
So I'll pipe in. Based on the working session, again, I just want to make the comment that I am finding this architecture to be really attractive, and I'm generally never pleased by the architecture that I see in our projects. So I want to commend you for listening to staff, Nanette, and then our working session, that you're really hitting on the intent of what the zoning code says. And I think that this is a very attractive development, and it's going to be a nice addition to that district.
Yeah,
Thank you, Amy.
add to Amy's comments that I've always been a huge detractor of long buildings, but you guys are without a doubt an exception to the rule, and so I really appreciate the work you've done into it. I like it.
Anyone else want to comment? I also really like the way that the green wall has been handled. I think that really makes a big difference, at least on the ground level, on the street level, in the perception of these buildings as being separate buildings, even though they're not. So I can entertain a motion if there's no further discussion.
I'll make the motion.
Who's that, Sarah?
Maureen.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Maureen.
Okay.
Sorry.
By the way, I like this building a lot. So based on the information in the staff report, I move the Planning Commission approve petition PLN PCM 2019-1106 regarding the Salt Lake Crossing design review in order to comply and have it comply with the standards of approval. One, the design of the project will be consistent with the staff report and submitted design review application. Two, the TSA development score approval is required prior to the building permit approval. Three, the ground floors shall be built in such a way as to allow for future active commercial uses along street-facing facades. And four, any changes to the site shall comply with all standards required by city departments.
Thank you.
I'll second Amy.
Thank you, Amy. I have a motion by Maureen, seconded by Amy. All in favor? So I'm going to go through the roll call. I have my own list, so it's different. Amy?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Crystal?
Yes.
The motion passes. Did I call everybody's name who's eligible to vote here? I think I did. Okay. And now we will go back to.
Brenda, I just have a question because we had two recuse.
Yes.
Do you have to vote?
I don't.
Based on the quorum rules?
No, the chair would only vote. So we would need at least 4 yes votes for it to pass.
Okay. I thought with 6 of us that became the quorum, but even then the chair doesn't need to cast a vote.
The chair would only cast a vote in instances where that vote is necessary to create a majority or in a tie.
Correct.
Okay, so it doesn't have any bearing on the quorum issue.
No.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
And back to you, Adrian.
Thank you, Brenda. Okay, we're now on to item number 4 on the agenda, the zoning map amendment at approximately 706 to 740 West, 900 South, case number PLN PCM 2019-01137. And Amy will be presenting this application.
Great, good evening. Let me get my presentation up. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay. So this is a request by the property owner for a map amendment to rezone 10 parcels and a portion of a city-owned public alley at approximately 706 to 740 West, 900 South. The properties are currently zoned light manufacturing M1, and the request is to rezone them to RMU, which is residential mixed use. Staff is recommending that the commission forward a positive recommendation to the city council with conditions. There are 2 existing commercial buildings on the site. The applicant plans to rehabilitate for restaurant and retail type uses that are currently allowed under the M1 zoning designation, as well as the proposed RMU zoning designation. The requested rezone would accommodate future development of the vacant eastern portion of the site for multifamily residential. The developer has not proposed a specific development plan as part of the rezone and does not have any pending building permits or other development applications for the property, with the exception of the small alley that's proposed to be vacated that's included in this rezone. The subject properties are located west of Interstate 15 along 900 South, one of the gateways to the west side neighborhoods. Several community uses surround the subject site, including the 9-line trail, 9-line bike park, and community gardens. The predominant street frontage of the vacant portion of the properties is along 900 South as well as 700 West. The surrounding properties on the block are zoned M1, however, with the exception of just a few properties, the primary use is predominantly single-family residential. There's also a religious use, summum, adjacent to the site on the northeast corner of the block. These slides show a photo of the site as well as surrounding development. And this is some of the surrounding development, the single-family residential that is adjacent to the property. The project's situated along 900 South and 700 West Industrial Corridor, an area that the West Side Master Plan identifies as an important gateway into the larger West Side community. The proposed RMU zoning district provides for a vibrant mix of uses that are more consistent with the future development goals and vision for the area than what could be developed under the existing M1 zoning designation. The parcels included in the proposed rezone are currently underutilized, mostly vacant land that are identified in the master plan as an appropriate area for high density housing. Master plan policies supporting the proposed map amendment are discussed in greater detail in attachment D of the staff report. The proposed RMU zoning district does have minimal design standards that would apply to any new development under the zoning designation. Those design standards are 40% ground floor glass for facades facing a street and 15-foot maximum length of any blank wall. Under the RMU design standard, something like structured parking could be located on the ground floor, which would not be consistent with the active pedestrian-oriented design envisioned in the master plan for this important gateway. Master plan policies in the area suggest that new development would benefit from additional design standards, such as an active ground floor use and durable material requirements on the ground floor and upper floors. Planning staff is recommending as a condition that the design standards applicable to the D2 zone are applied to any new project on the subject parcels that are developed under the proposed RMU zoning district. One way this could be accomplished is through a development agreement. Development agreements can only be approved by City Council. This slide shows the design standards that would be applicable just under the RMU that's proposed, as well as the D2 design standards that staff is recommending are imposed on the project. And the properties within the boundaries of the Poplar Grove Community Council, prior to submitting the rezone application, the applicants did attend a Poplar Grove Community Council meeting, which was hosted on the subject site in the vacant warehouse buildings. During the meeting, applicants discussed their plans to rezone the property, their intent for future development of the site. Planning staff also attended that meeting and answered questions from the community related to height, design standards, and building materials that would be applicable under the requested RMU zoning district. We also sent a early notification to the community council chairs of Poplar Grove and Glendale community councils, as well as property owners and residents within 300 feet of the project. We also held an open house because the project's within 2 feet or 600 feet of 2 community council districts. And we did receive 2 letters of support from both Poplar Grove Community Council and Glendale Community Council. And all public comments that were received as of the publication of the staff report are included in attachment G. And again, staff has reviewed the project for compliance with the zoning map amendment standards. And we are recommending that the commission forward a positive recommendation to the city council with the conditions. And those conditions relate to the city-owned alley and the petitioner entering into a purchase agreement with the city if alley is approved by city council, as well as the design standards applicable to the D2 zone be applied to this project if it's rezoned. And that is all I have for the presentation. I believe the applicants have a presentation as well.
Great, thank you, Amy. Any questions for Amy at this time? Amy Berry, let's go Amy Berry, then Brenda.
Okay, thanks, Amy. I have a couple of questions. The first one is related to that alley vacation. I'm generally opposed to them without more specific plans, but we also have standards on the books of when somebody applies for an alley vacation or petitions for it. Do you apply those, like public nuisance, safety, whatnot? Were those looked at when you made your recommendation to approve the alley vacation on this one?
So the alley vacation, the planning commission already reviewed that. It's been recommended by the planning commission, and it's just this, sorry, I'm going back to the slide. It's that tiny little orange area that's in between those 2 parcels.
Okay, so was this recommendation prior to me? Or was this the one where they had a proposal and they were going to make it part of like a, you know, a public area?
Yes.
So it's the one with the proposal that we saw.
Yeah, it's like a
last
patio.
week. Like a patio. So they
Patio.
do have so they had a proposal for what they wanted to do then, but now they're not putting that in part of this?
They have a conceptual plan, but a conceptual plan isn't associated with this rezone. So they do intend to redevelop those 2 commercial buildings on the site into restaurant retail type uses, and they do intend to have that alley as part of that. They have not submitted a formal application. They do have a conceptual plan that they may show images of tonight, but there's not a development plan associated with this.
Now I remember the conceptual plan, but I didn't necessarily remember that it was this address. So, okay, that's helpful. The other question I had was, what is the difference and why are you proposing an RMU versus an RMU 35, which is what's happening to the west? What's the difference? What's the main difference, and why is an RMU more preferable than what's going on west?
So the applicants may be better able to answer that question as terms of why they're proposing what they're proposing. But in terms of some of the main differences between RMU and RMU 35 would be the height. RMU can go up to 75 feet for residential uses, and RMU 35 can go to 35 feet. So I would say that's the biggest difference. There may be setback or other differences, but I think the height is the main difference.
Okay. Thank you.
The existing M1 zone, they're allowed to go to 65 feet.
Okay. Brenda, did you still have a question?
I forgot what it was, so sorry. I'm sure I'll remember it later.
Okay. And Matt, do you have a question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it this modifying the design review standards as part of a zoning proposal? I mean, I guess, so those would only apply to just this area, these lots, you know, these properties. I just don't, it isn't common. Like, I don't know if I ever remember modifying design review standards for a specific parcel with a zoning change ever before. I'm just curious on why that's happening together instead of going, you know, later as part of a plan development or something else that we're looking at those design review points instead of in a zoning project.
The recommendation is to not to modify those specific standards. It's to impose additional standards because the RMU zone just has basically 2 design standards. And the D2 zone has a lot more design standards, and we're recommending that those are imposed on the project. If at a time when the developer does have a development proposal, if they wanted to modify design standards, then they would come before you, or it may be an administrative.
And those design standards then are only applicable to these parcels, not, is that correct?
It would be tied to the rezone, yes, through a development agreement with city council.
Yeah, there would have to be a development agreement entered into between the property owner and the city council.
Right.
So the
Is that
staff
common that
is making that recommendation.
that we do a rezone and then tie it to just with design standards? Is that common?
So this is Nick. I'm going to weigh in on this one. It's not common. This is actually fairly unusual. The reason why we are proposing this is because we feel like the RMU zone on its face is incompatible with what the master plan for the area says. And so we just haven't had time to update the RMU zoning district. We haven't had the staff resources to do it. And so this is our avenue to be able to do that at this time.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So if it's incompatible, then why are we proposing approving it?
Because with the proposed condition, it is compatible. So
Okay,
part
so
of what
it's compatible to put a 75-foot building there?
So with the master plan and the city goals, yes, it is. One of the issues that we're facing as a city is that we don't have a lot of areas where you can build residential, particularly multifamily. In fact, I think it's like 3% of our total land area is zoned for multifamily, and that includes all the mixed use districts like the D1 and the TSA zones and Sugar House Business District. And so part of some of the other master plan policies that we do have as a city do talk about transitioning some of these older industrial areas into more of a mixed use type of area. And so given where this is and some of the other structures and infrastructure that's around it and what the current zoning allows as far as building scale, we do think that 75 feet is appropriate.
Is there anything
Any other
else?
questions?
Is there
Oh,
anything
there you
else
go.
that's
Go ahead,
75
Brenda.
feet around it? Sorry.
So so there's the M1 zone alone allows buildings, I think, up to 60 or 65 feet. And
Yeah.
then to the north of here, where the LDS Church Welfare Square is, there's significantly taller structures there for those functions. But most of the existing structures are less than that.
It seems to me, I went out to this neighborhood and it seems to me like that it's primarily a fairly low scale neighborhood, but there may be some M1 uses, but they're more warehousey and maybe old commercial buildings than taller structures. And there's a lot of single family uses in this area too. So I'm sort of wondering about this ability. I mean, I don't think that having these design standards, I'm wondering if well, let's put it this way. I'm wondering if these design standards actually have really, can really help very much with something that's a pretty large scale building. So maybe we just let that go for now and let the applicant.
Any other questions at this point for staff? Okay, I think we will now move on to the applicant's presentation. Is the applicant here and ready to go?
So I've made there's 4 people on the applicant's team, and I don't know which one of them wants to make the presentation.
It should be
So-
Max. It should be Max.
Max, I'm here.
All right, I will move that. All right. You should be ready to go, Max.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Thank you, first off, Amy, for shepherding this process. It's quite complicated. I also want to thank the community for their input and their involvement. The neighbors in the community were very active in voicing their opinions. Just from I'm Max Careth, the managing partner for Highboy Ventures. Just from our side, we're really excited about the potential of this project, just because we think it could be a catalytic. It could be very catalytic for the West Side, and really sort of start activating sort of like that gateway beyond I-15 and the railroad tracks. Just the point of my presentation, I think Amy covered a lot of things, and there may be some redundancy. I just really wanted to highlight how I felt that this zone amendment is really consistent with both the West Side Master Plan and the 9-line corridor master plan. Just to give you a quick recap, I think you guys are familiar with this, but the lot, the property in question, as you can see, is in the red lines. We acquired both, these 2 sites just over a year ago, and obviously we're requesting zone amendment from M1, which is light manufacturing, to RMU. Just to dive right into it, I mean, I think according to the West Side Master Plan, there's a real lack of connectivity between the West Side and the rest of the city, and I think it talks about strengthening the connections, sort of across from the West Side to the other parts of the city. In particular, as you all are familiar with, there's pretty much 3 nodes: 800 South, 900 South, and 1300 South. And 900 South was sort of identified as the one that needed the most attention. Again, I think doing this zone amendment and trying to change this vacant land into something that is actually a mixed use development, I think would really be consistent with some of the visions of the master plan. I think you saw this. I think I pulled this as well from the 9-line master plan. I think this was in Amy's presentation. I think really the main point being, obviously, as you're well familiar with, there's a BMX bike park, there's community gardens. So clearly, the city is very aware of this being sort of a key node. We think doing a mixed use development here, I think would really add to sort of creating this idea of a major gateway, and really doing away with. Currently, it feels to me like very much if you come on 900 South from the east towards there, the railroads, the railroad tracks, the I-15 seem very much like a barrier, and I think it almost like sort of prevents you from going across. And I think you guys were obviously asking questions about height. There's two reasons for height that we've thought about. Is one, just to start. Obviously, we talked about structures that are high around there. The I-15 freeway is actually 45 feet high, so it's actually pretty high up, and it's quite intimidating. I think putting a building, and that's one of the reasons that we asked for RMU, putting a building that's a little bit above would create, as people drive by, would create sort of like, and sort of an attraction for people to go, oh, what's on that side? And I think that was the idea. And then second, there's obviously quite a noise issue, and we thought, putting a building that's a little bit higher than the freeway would be advantageous in creating a noise barrier. And then finally, I think you talked about, the height being sort of maybe too high relative to what's next to it. Again, we're not talking about getting rid of those existing vacant warehouse buildings, which I don't know how high they are, but I assume they're about 25 to 30 feet high. I think it would sort of be a step down to sort of, the more lower single family housing. Again, this is sort of I wanted to zoom out to sort of give you sort of a little bit of an idea of where exactly this is located. I think this development makes a lot of sense. If you think of all the things that are happening on 900 South, sort of extending that development, I think creating, like I said, a gateway, sort of a catalytic project on the other side of the freeway, I think would be really great for, kind of, getting people to go across that barrier that is currently I-15 and railroad tracks, make use of the Jordan River Park and all the amenities that the West Side has. Again, we talked about, the West Side Master Plan. I think one of the things that it talks about is how there is an inequitable share of land dedicated to manufacturing uses. Again, I think with this zone amendment, I think we would obviously help with that. And again, I think it's in the spirit of the West Side Master Plan. I think one of the things that we talked about here when we sort of talked to the community, there was a lot of talk about what the community was looking for. And obviously a lot of things that we heard was services, restaurants, coffee shops. There's not actually a coffee shop, west of I-15. So I think that's one of the reasons I think we're trying to come up with this mixed use is to really create services, in those vacant warehouse buildings, which is phase one, with sort of like a public, public square for the community and eventually for potentially, residents of the future mixed use development. But I think the idea really is to create services for the community, as such as restaurants and coffee shops in those warehouse spaces, which I'll address, at the end of the presentation. I'll talk a little bit about this phase one. And then finally, we talk about, multifamily infill. Again, both plans sort of, talk about that as being an issue. I think, again, the zone amendment would sort of address this issue in the sense of, I think it's prime land to be sort of, which we should dedicate to sort of more residential use. Just to give you an idea, this is some more pictures of what this looks like now. Obviously, we have these two vacant commercial structures. We've got the alley. We want to re-energize this area by, like I said, creating some services for the local community. Obviously, that's a little bit tied into being able to get the zone amendment done so we can actually have more residents and more residents on what is currently the vacant land to sort of get more activity going in this area. We also want to reinvigorate the neglected mid-block crossing. Like I said, we talked a little bit about that sort of public square between those two buildings. And as you can see on the next presentation, that's the hope what it will look like when we actually are done with it. You can see that arch that's essentially between those two buildings. That's a view from the alley looking east. So that's essentially what we're trying to do. Just an update on that. I think we finalized the budget on this. We're working with the RDA. Obviously, we're trying to get financing with the RDA. We're pretty far along, as you may know, but we're finalizing the budget at the end of this month. It's coming in as we expected, and we're looking to apply for building permits on this phase one, hopefully in May. And again, I think like I said, we're pretty excited about this project. We think it'd be really great to extend the vibrancy of what's happening in the granary west of I-15 and sort of create a nexus of activity. Like I said, mixed use development with services, commercial activity, and more residential. I think that's all I have.
Great, thank you very much. Do we have questions for the applicant? Matt has one.
Your renderings don't show a 65-foot building. I'm just talk me through how you see that kind of fitting on the parcel, if it's if you're just going that through part of the parcel, if the whole parcel is going to be 65 feet. I mean, give me a sense of how you see all that playing itself out.
To be honest, this is a two-phase project. From my perspective, I think it's really sort of a little bit contingent on the zone amendment. I think this idea of 65 feet. Like I told you, I think my biggest concern is I think to be successful with the commercial phase one. I think obviously currently it's mostly single family homes there. I think to really be successful with the commercial services, I think you need to do a little bit more density on the vacant land. I'm not sure I'm asking for 65 feet. What I'm asking for is, I think it would be great to be above the freeway, because the freeway, if you walk there, it's quite imposing. And actually having a structure that actually is a little bit taller than the freeway would actually, I think, enhance the neighborhood, because now you're actually looking at a nicer building. And B, I think it would be, you could see it from the freeway, and it would attract people to finally come to that side and sort of create an extension of the granary. So I'm not here sitting.
I'm not
telling you that I want a 65-foot building, and we really haven't talked that much about design. I mean, GSBS is helping me with this, and we've mastered. I think with the way we've had it is roughly, like I said, probably a story higher than the freeway.
I mean, I'm not opposed to the increased height. It's more, I'm opposed to like a giant Borg cube being placed in the spot. So I'm just trying to get a sense of that.
I think the only thing I can tell you is, obviously, from my perspective, these two buildings actually, it's very expensive to do an adaptive reuse on these buildings. These two warehouse buildings, which I think are beautiful and I want to keep, because I think they're part of the history of this. I think we would not try to put a building there that would clash with that, or just, I think we're obviously pretty mindful of aesthetics. And I think obviously, if we have to come back for design review, I think we would obviously, we know that, Amy and planning would certainly want to see certain standards, and as well as the community. I think you're sort of addressing the biggest issue the community has had, which is nobody wants like an ugly building there.
There aren't any, I don't know anything protecting those warehouses other than, currently. They're not historic or anything. There's no protections on them that prevents demolition.
They're not.
Yeah, correct. Thanks.
So on page 14 and I think 15 of the staff report, we see a massing drawing. It's basically showing sort of how big a building could be built there. Actually, it could be bigger than that, really. But certainly how tall it is. So is that sort of, I know that you haven't designed anything, and it's obviously not going to be a big white box like shown here, but that accurately represents like a 75-foot tall building mass. You would be able to build with an RMU zone.
Yes, I think to address your question, I think it's pretty. I think it's important that I think the massing that you see is maybe a 6-story building. Just because I think
it looks like more like 7 or 8, but yeah, okay.
I think we're trying to get above the freeway. That's sort of like the whole purpose of that, and so that's really where I'm coming from. Is I think being above the freeway. I think we need more housing in the city. I mean, we all know this. I think this is a great place. This is a transitional area. If there's going to be a place next, where we're going to put a higher building, I think it should be next to a freeway. So we're just literally just trying to be realistic and saying you're absolutely right. We could go that high, but I think it would be actually beneficial to the neighborhood to be actually taller than the freeway.
Yeah, and if I can jump in, I would actually agree with the applicant. I think a taller building next to a freeway is actually a benefit. As long as we start to terrace and break down the mass as we get towards the residential side of the building or towards the plaza side. Obviously, this is a placeholder, and I think it's a little misleading as to what the potential of the building is. But I've worked on sites similar to this, and I feel that just to block some of the sound and block the visual impact of what the freeway is and how imposing it is on the neighborhood. I think something like this actually makes sense. And as the neighborhood develops around this, I would hope to see kind of things that would transition that scale as the rest of the neighborhood develops as well. But that being said, I do think it would be good to do a working session like we've done in the past on some of these projects we've talked about tonight, just so that we can kind of verify that those things start to happen and it's not just the big box.
Madam Chair, can I add to that? This is Amy.
Yes.
I was just going to add what Commissioner Lee just said. That was that was similar to what the comments were when we attended the community council meeting. Many of the residents commented on how they thought that a taller building would shield sound from the freeway, and they thought it would be a good transition to not have to see the freeway and rather see a building. So I just wanted to add to that.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, I would agree. And given that the adjacent parcels under the MU zone could also be much taller if they were built to their full density, it doesn't seem to me that it's that radical a change, even based on what's currently in existence in the area. Okay, any other questions for the applicant right now? Okay, then why don't we go to the public hearing? I will open the public hearing. Is there anyone here from the community council who would like to speak?
Madam Chair, yes, we do have.
Rely on Nick.
Yeah, we do have Dennis Ferris from the community council. He's unmuted, and I'll let him speak.
Thank you very much, Nick.
Great, thank you.
Hello, all. My name is Dennis Ferris. I am former chair, current vice chair of the Poplar Grove Community Council. Would definitely love to speak on behalf of this project. Strongly in favor of it. This developer and his team have been in constant communication with us and the council in the community since day one. He first called us to say that he had the property under contract, and before he determined a plan for the site, he wanted to hear what it is the community wanted or needed to have. That communication has continued since day one. So we've been engaged. He has actually implemented any and all possible suggestions and requests that we have made. I think it's a grand tribute to them and their plan that phase one is to renovate and restore the existing historic buildings, even though there is no pre-existing protection for them. That he felt that that was an important step one to do. I think says a lot for his willingness to work with and for the community as a whole. Along with this rezone, some neighbors nearby the property on the same block have also inquired about rezoning their own properties, looking perhaps to rebuild their homes, that sort of thing. And it's a tad more difficult to do in an M1 zone than it would be with an RMU. And these guys have actually assisted us along the way in helping those residents to further that application process too. So hopefully you'll be seeing that rezone request soon. This project would give us a much needed increased housing density within the city, within our neighborhood. As you guys saw, there is a lot of single family homes. In fact, in our neighborhood in particular, there is more land per house than just about anywhere else. And to be able to offset that and get a few more people in there would actually be good. It's a little bit stronger tax base there. Let's see. Developer also has immediately cleaned up the property upon closing of the deal. It was a horrific eyesore for many, many decades, and has already been cleaned up dramatically, and he has kept it secure. He's proven to be a strong partner for us already. The access here to connect the east and west sides across that grand physical barrier of the freeway and the railway would be a much needed step. The access to the 9-line trail that is soon to be continued eastward all the way up to the East Bench. Access to regional parks like Jordan Park, the bike park that's kitty corner from this project, the community gardens right across the street, gives it a lot of available green space for even the large number of families that could potentially reside in this project eventually. And as far as I know, some people are concerned about the overall possible height of this, but within one block, when you've got not just the grain silos at Welfare Square, you also have the silos of the Mountain Cement Company. You also have the silos that is the Fear Factory haunted house. There are plenty of taller buildings immediately surrounding it, and that are far less desirable to see. So yeah, this could be a huge improvement to the neighborhood as a whole. We would love to see it. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Nick, is there
We also,
any?
there is another person who wants to speak, Mike Reed.
Yes, can you hear me?
Great.
Yeah.
You can.
Yes.
What I'm concerned about is I own property in the area, but is that we're getting rid of all the areas for low-income housing. There's nothing included for affordable housing. Yes, we're buying up this land, and the neighbors want to be able to change their zoning so they can put a big building in. But you know what this is doing is just shaking up all the land that low-income people used to live in. And yeah, we got some big buildings, but we don't allow for any type of affordable housing. There are schools just up the street on 7th West, Jackson Elementary. There's Bryant, which they bus people over to. There's West High, but we don't have anything that really caters to multi-families, which is what they said they were wanting to do. And I tried to make a comment during the last thing about where do people park that are friends, and you know, and where is the low-income housing involved in this that allows people to stay in the neighborhood? We're building these huge buildings, but we're not allowing for we're gentrifying everybody out of the neighborhoods. And pretty soon we probably will close Jackson Elementary because all the homes will surely disappear because we're building these 65-foot story buildings. And that's my concern is that, yeah, we've got these things and people want to sell their house out, but they're lower income homes. And that's where people who are on Section 8 or from their own home actually live. Anyway, that's my concern. I actually am involved with another project with affordable housing, and I don't know if I missed it, but at the end maybe we could revisit it. You might have already voted on it, and because I guess I thought it started closer to 7:30 or 8. But anyway, that's my comment. Is that we've eliminated low-income housing, and we're taking up all the land on the west side, and where are these other people going to live? Anyway, that's my comment. Is that we're using
Thank
that.
you.
Hate to rehash it. Thanks.
Thank you. Nick, are there any other people who would like to speak?
We did receive now 2 emails that I think Michaela Octay is going to read into the record.
Great.
They're from the same person, from some church. It's from Bernie Au. The first email says, it appears Salt Lake City is allowing more and more high-density apartment buildings to be constructed. And with the proposed zoning change, we're concerned that the same will happen in this area, which has been a relatively peaceful area and has been home for our minority church, temple, sanctuary. Should this happen, it will completely change the pleasant dynamics currently going on in the area. We also understand the developer is interested in obtaining more property close by. We understand there currently are no specific development proposal. Is there going to be any oversight on what the site plan is? We oppose any zoning change until we understand what is specifically intended for this area. And then Bernie wrote another comment in after the community council's comments. So now we are finding out our church, which has been a sacred place of respite and sanctuary for individuals coming to partake of the divine milieu, is now going to be hemmed in by a very tall building right next to us. This is very concerning. It will impose significantly on the religious environment that we've established since 1978. This is not a benefit to us at all and imposes on our minority church. Full stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Michaela. Nick, are there any other comments or people who want to speak live?
It does not appear that we've received any other comments, and no other hands are up.
Okay. Given that no one else wishes to speak, I will now close the public meeting and bring this back to the commission. And I guess I have a question for staff before we go back into this. Do we know the location of the existing church? Is that adjacent to this site, or do we have any idea of where that, from the comment we just received?
Yeah, so I don't have my screen sharing abilities anymore, but if you look on the staff report in the site plan, it's basically the northeast portion of that block. So it's I don't know if you are familiar with the site, having driven out there or anything, but it's where there's a pyramid on the corner.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I just got
So it's
presented.
that, so where the where the property boundary jogs in the parcel, the portion of this block that's not included within this petition, that's where the existing church is, where we received the comment from the pastor.
Right. So I got my screen sharing abilities back, so it's just that corner that's not included in the orange outlined area on the same block.
And is that one lot or two? Is that entire lot used as the church? Do you
I
know?
believe just the corner property is. I don't think that they own the property to the west, but I'm not positive about that. But yes, the corner property is the same.
Okay.
And I did
Okay.
speak to somebody from that group came to the open house, as well as came to the city offices to talk about just what would be required in terms of setbacks, what they could do now versus what they could do under the RMU. And they were going to submit some comments to me, but I never received those. So there is a notation of that in the staff report. I believe it's on page 43, just analyzing what the differences are between what they could build now versus what they could build under the RMU, which does have greater setback restrictions. The RMU zone does in terms of the rear yard setback, and I believe the interior side yard, or that may be the same.
Okay. I see that now. Yep. I'll go back to the applicant to see if he had wanted to respond to any of the comments that we received.
Thank you for giving me. I guess the only thing I would question is the peaceful nature of the neighborhood. The alley is pretty well known as being having a lot of crime, which is one of the reasons that we're trying to activate it. And I think there's a lot of issues there. We've had a lot of issues with people leaving junk, garbage, which is why I think in the pictures you can see why we put the concrete barriers in. We've had a lot of issues towing, RVs. It's been a lot of things. So I'm sure it's peaceful. I just, from my perspective, I think, getting a few more people there I think it would benefit the neighborhood in terms of, creating a little bit more just people on the streets and eyes on the streets.
All right, thank you. Okay, bring it back to commission to see if anyone has any questions for staff, any discussion, or if anyone's willing to entertain a motion.
I would like to make a comment in relation to affordable housing. I think one of the misconceptions is that creating more housing automatically makes everything else more expensive. And the comment I want to make is, this lot in particular, we're not really tearing down any existing homes. It's really cleaning up 2 lots that are pretty rough at the moment, if I'm being honest. And in theory, these are going to create more housing for people in a housing shortage. So that should maintain the existing homes to be more affordable. And I just want to talk to that because I feel like it comes up a lot. And I think it's misunderstood a little bit, that just creating housing doesn't automatically make everything more expensive. I think it can help keep the things around it more affordable. And the other comment I wanted to make was a lot of the homes nearby aren't talking about necessarily selling their property. They're just trying to get more an easier access to just upgrade their homes to make them nicer, which I also think is a benefit to the community as well. And maintaining their homes to be able to keep those as affordable housing. So that's kind of my comments.
Yeah, thanks for that, John.
Yeah, and I just wanted
I
to
would
also make the comment when we talk about where density kind of belongs. If we think back in the presentation we had from the Wasatch Front Regional Council, some of the things that they've brought up have really brought in my view about where density belongs. Because we do need more housing, but we don't want density everywhere. And we have, low density, medium density, and high density. And when I look at now places where high density really makes sense, this is one of them. One, it's adjacent to the freeway, but it's also very close to freeway access on that West Temple on-ramp and off-ramp. And I think that those are areas that are more prime for where we should be focusing some of this density to try to meet our housing needs. And that's something I just want to throw out there as we look at how the city continues to change.
Thanks, Amy. Brenda, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I do. So one of the things that hasn't been raised here, and we've talked about, having the height and additional density near highways, but I think that one of the things that we are not considering and should consider in terms of a zoning change to residential, there's a reason that there are M1 zones along highways. Highways are noisy and they create quite a bit of air pollution. And there's actually been some studies, quite a few studies actually done about the level of air pollution, damaging air pollution, lead, nitrous oxide, and other kinds of particulate matter that accumulate along highways to the detriment of, particularly of children. So, so people are now no longer wanting to have schools near highway because of the possibility of children being out and playing and so forth. So I don't think, as a general rule, putting a high density residential residential area right next to a highway, and I don't know, I was trying to find the literature on it just now, but of the distance, but it's certainly within the distance that this project is next to the highway. So I think this is a consideration that we have not discussed, and by allowing a pretty dense residential project to go in here, I think that, I had no problem with this project when I thought it was, for some reason, a lower height project when we were talking about the original project that we were looking at where the alley was vacated. But now that I hear it's intended to be this kind of significant major building, I really have some issues with changing the zoning so we allow something like this to be built where children will be allowed to live there.
So I just
Thank you,
maybe
Brenda.
want to join that discussion. Prior to me being on the planning commission approved a residential building that's going to be built right along the freeway in Sugar House. 2 major office buildings and a major residential building. That residential building is being built now. And so I'm sure I could think of other high density buildings that are already in existence adjacent to freeways, in addition to that one I know is going up. So why aren't we concerned about that everywhere? And prior to me getting on, was that brought up for the residential building that's going to be built in the Sugar House Business District adjacent to the freeway?
Brenda, I think you're on mute.
The answer is I don't think it was brought up, but I think it should be an issue for high density residential zoning everywhere. I mean, I was involved in building an apartment building right on a freeway, and I still look at that building and regret every day, the amount of pollution that goes right in through the window, 30 feet away from the highway.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was just going to make a comment that I agree that that's a valid concern. And I don't know if the project still pencils as like maybe a hotel where people aren't living there. Maybe they're just a temporary resident or another use, but it is a valid concern.
Sorry.
Any other discussion from the commission? Or is anyone willing to make a motion? And again, we are simply recommending to the city council, they have the final approval over this application as it's a rezone.
I'll make a motion.
Real quick, can I?
Thanks.
Sorry, I was just going to make a comment about the recommended condition of applying the design standards for the D2 zone. And I know this hasn't been brought up, but I do think that the commission has a couple of options with that. One of the options that you do have is just to instead of trying to apply standards that haven't really been factored into this area necessarily or analyzed, is you do have the option of requiring any new development to go on that parcel to go through the design review process. And that process has fairly extensive standards that they would have to demonstrate how they meet those standards instead of having the prescribed standards of the D2 zone applying. Just throwing that out there as something for the commission to consider.
Thanks, Nick.
Okay. I'm ready to make a motion if that's okay.
Yes, please.
Based on the analysis and findings listed in the staff report, information presented, and the input received during the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission recommend that the City Council approve the proposed zoning map amendment from M1 to RMU, file PLN PCM 2019-01137 for 10 parcels and a portion of a city-owned alley located at approximately 706-740 West, 900 South, with the conditions listed in the staff report. Also, with a third condition that any new development must go through the design review process.
Second.
Okay. A motion by Sarah, a second by John. Let's start with Maureen.
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Brenda,
No.
Sarah.
I'm voting yes, and I want to put on record that I'm really, I'm grateful to the builder or developer for being so active with the community and really listen to their needs. And I just am glad when we have good neighbors. So thanks to him.
And Crystal.
Yes.
Okay. 4 in favor, 1 opposed, motion passes. So the matter will next be heard by the City Council for approval, and I'd like to reiterate what Sarah noted. It is nice to see and hear from community representatives and developers who have engaged productively and worked together to come before us, and we do appreciate that. So best of luck. All right. Item 5. Thank you. Item 5 on our agenda, the zoning map and master plan amendment at approximately 261 North Redwood Road, case numbers PLN PCM 2019-01086 and PLN PCM 2019-01087. And Sarah is providing the staff report. Is that right?
Yes. Thank you.
Great.
So can you see my screen now?
Yes.
And can you hear me all right as well?
Yes, thank you.
Great. So this is a proposal to rezone a split zoned property from R1 5000 single family residential and RMF 35 moderate density multifamily residential to RMF 35. The proposed rezone is anticipated to allow for redevelopment of the site with additional multifamily housing. To provide a greater context, the property is located on the west side of Redwood Road. It's approximately a quarter mile north of North Temple, and it's also north of several properties zoned TSA where there are apartments under construction or recently constructed in this general area here. This one is under construction now. As far as the existing zoning, as I mentioned, it's split zoned. You can see the RMF 35 portion here and the R1 5000 portion here. This is a result of a 1987 rezoning that affected approximately 750 acres. At that point in time, there was concern regarding more intensive development of properties in the area. And right now, the property to the south is zoned RMF 35. Further to the south is TSA zoned property. To the east is additional TSA zoned property. And then to the north and west are properties that are also zoned R1 5000. As far as the existing conditions on the site, the left shows the photograph of the existing development from Redwood Road. And then the right photo shows the rear of the property looking towards Redwood Road from Gemini Drive, which terminates at the rear of the property. There are some existing zoning limitations with the split zoning. The property currently has 4 units. There's enough land area for 1 additional unit. The R1 5000 zoned area has enough land area for 5 units. This would likely be difficult because of the frontage requirements. The proposed zoning would allow for up to 26 units on the site. As far as compatibility with the master plan, the proposal requires a master plan amendment. However, it is consistent with some planning documents. Plan Salt Lake has growth and housing initiatives that it's consistent with. These include locating development near transit and transportation corridors. And it's located about a quarter mile north of the tracks line on North Temple, and Redwood Road also has a frequent service. It also promotes infill and redevelopment of underutilized land. It would increase medium density housing options, and it would also direct growth to areas with existing infrastructure, which are all included in Plan Salt Lake. The proposal is also consistent with growing SLC, and it's consistent with the North Temple Master Plan station area policies and strategies. The Northwest Master Plan, which was adopted in 1992, does not call for changes in this area. But as previously discussed, there has been a number of changes in the area recently, and the proposal is consistent with some of those changes. It would provide for a transition from more intensive development. It would provide additional housing in the area, and it would provide infill development on an underutilized parcel. As far as public process, planning mailed a recognized organization notice, sent early notification to property owners, and also sent the public hearing notice, and staff has not received comments from the public. And so staff's recommendation is that based on the information in the staff report, Planning Commission recommends that the Planning Commission staff recommends that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council for the proposed zoning map amendment and also the proposed master plan amendment. And that concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Sarah. Are there any questions for Sarah at this point? Okay. Is the applicant here or somewhere?
The applicant is available. Ian Cameron, I have unmuted his microphone. Ian, are you with us? We appear to have some audio issues with Ian. Ian, can you type in a question into the Q&A to make sure that we can hear you? Or that you can hear us?
Gentlemen, thank you so much. Appreciate both of you coming on and for that. Of course, back to best of you first. We also see signs that the curve may be flattening. That is good news, of course, but we're still seeing.
I think we hear somebody's news in the background.
That to stay the case, how long do we need to keep these closures?
I don't know who else is. Looks like everybody else is muted except Ian. And I don't know why he can't hear us or
respond.
Maybe what we can do is open, if you want, we can open the public hearing. He was communicating through the Q&A earlier. So he was present. And I don't know if he's having difficulties. Ian, if you're having difficulties, you may want to exit the meeting
and rejoin.
And try to rejoin if you can hear me. And let's try that. You can also call into the phone number.
All right. Well, while we wait for Ian, why don't we move to the public hearing? I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Do we have anyone from the community council who would like to speak?
I don't know anyone. We do have one hand up. Mike Reed. Mike, do you want to comment on this item as well?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
I can.
I'm concerned. Again, it's about affordable housing, and like the Fourth West project, the apartment complex there, they rent their apartments for $25,000 to $5,000 a month, and yeah, people say, oh yeah, we're gonna include those people, but who can afford $2,500 to $5,000 a month? $5,000 a month can buy you $1 million house, and what we're doing is we're putting up all these buildings where nobody can afford to live. And because it's a cheap land and we're eating up all, if we did this in the avenues, people would be really upset if we allowed all this kind of development. And anyway, that's my concern is that why don't we talk about how much we're going to rent these places for and see if people can really afford them if they're not subsidized somehow. $2,500 to $5,000 a month. That's bizarre. Anyway, that's my concern is that we're just eating up all the west side, putting up all these buildings. Nobody can afford, none of the poor people can afford them. Even Section 8 won't even subsidize it because they have a window. But we have a certain window that people can rent. And if you can't fit in that window and the people don't drop their rent, those people cannot live there. So we're just eating up gentrifying the whole west side. That's my concern. And where are the parks going to be? There's no parks that are really around there. Do we have any area for people to go play soccer other than there's one over by the Jordan River where there's a school? When the school's there, they don't allow people in. They lock the gates. Anyway, that's my concern. So that we're locking everybody out of that live in that neighborhood out of living there. The children can't live there. Anyway, I appreciate that's my comment. I'm just concerned about low-income housing and how it's disappearing.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment.
Listening to me.
Nick, is there anyone else who's indicating they would like to speak?
I do not see any other comments. I'm going to try to get in touch with Ian again and see if I can.
And have we received any emails either that need to be read?
Let me double check. No, I do not see any at this point. Let me see if I can message Ian real quick.
So since there's no one else who wishes to speak, I will close the public hearing and we will see if we can get a hold of the applicant.
While we're waiting for the applicant, can I ask Sarah a question?
Sure.
So Sarah, maybe I missed this, but I see in some of the pictures, this Gemini Drive that seems to be closed where this property is. How is that? Has that been closed or are they going to build on that, or do we know, will they have to keep that open as they create a design?
Sure, sorry. So Gemini Drive does end at that property boundary. And so I'm not sure what their proposal would be at this point. I think it would depend on whether they would need access from Gemini Drive or not. They haven't submitted a proposal as part of this project, but right now the right-of-way for it ends at the property.
It ends at the property on both sides. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. How is there a history? How did that happen?
Well, I don't believe it extends further to the south. I think that's that's a private driveway on that property. Let me go ahead and put my screen back up and I can at least put on the aerial that shows that.
From the look of it, it looks like the only way you could develop it would be to have a fire lane that ran that whole length. Otherwise, it'd be too deep to build anything.
It's a little difficult to see with the color of the zoning on top, but you can see that for 247 and 257, those are part of a single development. And there's a driveway that extends, and that's part of that development rather than a public street.
Okay, on page 12 of the staff report, you don't see the colors and it looks like it's a street coming from both directions. So that just is coincidence, I guess.
Well, that's a multifamily development to the south, right? It's an apartment complex. And
Right.
that's
Yeah.
basically their.
That's actually just a service or a fire lane within that. I was out there today, and it doesn't even really line up. So I mean, it kind of lines up. You could do it, but even if you did do it, it would be difficult. You would have to get the permission of the apartment complex to use that as
Right.
an access way, and
Okay.
that is by no means
That's not our place. No, as I'm looking at it on this page, I assume that Gemini Drive went all the way through and wondered. So yeah, that's clarification. That's what I needed. Thank you.
And I just wanted to add, when the applicant didn't provide a site plan or any kind of development proposal, but did indicate in at least part of his submittal that there was some intent to develop low-income housing on the property. I didn't include that as part of the presentation, but based on the comments, just wanted to add that.
Thanks, Sarah. Nick, any luck getting a hold of the applicant?
So I have another question for Sarah. How wide is this property?
I believe it's 76 feet wide.
Okay, all right. Okay.
I'm trying to contact him by every avenue I have available to me. So give me just 1 second to send him an email.
And I did send him an email a few minutes ago as well.
Call into CNN.
I've got to say this meeting has been pretty smooth up until this moment. So kudos to everybody.
They all stand up and stretch. Oh my gosh.
It's a good plan.
So here are my thoughts if we can't get the applicant on the line. But we can continue the matter, or we can proceed without the applicant, without their input. That's maybe a difficult decision, but we can do it.
What does the next meeting
Had to say
agenda look
something.
like? What does the next meeting agenda look like? How long is this gonna be?
Give me a second and I'll take a quick look at it.
Okay.
The other thing to keep in mind is this is a recommendation to the city council, so we're not the final decision-making body here. So if we wanted to proceed and vote on this item, that he would still have an opportunity to make a presentation to the city council before the final decision's made. But again, I agree with Paul.
I'd just like to point out that I was looking at the width of this lot, and it's pretty much the same as the width of the lot for the CW Urban LE project that we just looked at. So knowing how those guys had sort of put that thing together, this would be a likely one way that a person could develop a lot that was long and skinny like that.
I do have one question for Sarah is, and I'm pretty sure this is correct, but we can connect with a private drive from Redwood Road over to that alleyway. Is that correct? If they did like a one-way road and then be able to do units off that private drive.
Sorry,
Off the private
I
drive
did
to
get
the
an
south
email
or
response back
Gemini?
from the applicant, and he said that he was.
Oh.
I muted myself. I did get an email back from the applicant saying he was needed a password, and I sent him the link again. Could you tell me your question one more time on the access? Oh, let me put my
Yeah,
screen back up.
just with the narrow lot, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer already, but just Redwood Road to that alleyway for like a drive-through access of a one-way street, would that be viable to connect those two with a private drive?
It seems that way to me, and that would be a decision the applicant would need to make as part of their proposal.
Yeah, so just when you look at fire lanes and other things, I think it seems feasible as a buildable site. That's my only question.
All right, we've sent the link again to this applicant, so at least he's communicating to us. Hang on, let's.
Crystal, does your husband do delivery? Because I don't live far from you. Like,
Right?
yeah.
Exactly.
So there's just a heads up. There's 5 items on the, at least right now, on the April 22nd Planning Commission meeting. One of those items is an extension of a previous approval. So it's just like tonight. There's similar agendas to tonight. But I guess part of it is if there are concerns with this proposal, I could see tabling it and getting it on the next agenda, and we can work with the applicant and do more test runs with him on the software. If there's not, I guess the question is there any reason to table it? Is there any new information that you think the applicant could add on this?
So can we just get a general sense from everyone if they've got serious concerns they want to hear from the applicant?
I'm okay moving forward.
Okay, the sense I'm getting is just based on nods for the record. We're willing to move forward tonight, notwithstanding.
You give it like a 6 of a 10.
I would like to make a motion, Madam Chairman.
Great, thank you, Brenda.
I'm going to make the motion to approve with conditions listed in the staff report. Based on the information in the staff report, the information presented, and the input received during the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission approve the, excuse me, I'm on the wrong. Sorry, we are. Okay. Positive recommendation to City Council. Based on the findings and analysis in the staff report, testimony and discussion at the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council for the proposed zoning map amendment, file PLN PCM 2019-01086, proposed zone change from R1 5000 single family residential district to RMF 35 moderate density multifamily residential, and file PLN PCM 2019-01087, proposed master plan amendment from low density residential to medium density residential.
I'll second.
All right, we've got a motion by Sarah, a second by Amy.
It's a motion by Brenda.
Oh, sorry. Motion by Brenda, second by Amy.
Just to get the record straight, that's all.
I know. Should know better. Let's start with Crystal.
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Brenda,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Maureen.
Yes.
All right, great. Unanimous motion passes. Okay. Seeing nothing else on the agenda, unless, Nick, you have anything, any parting words of wisdom?
I actually did want to thank everybody for bearing with us. This went way smoother than I think we anticipated. I was actually impressed that we had 30-something attendees the meeting. So that went well. If anybody has any feedback on ways to improve or anything like that, don't hesitate to shoot us an email. And again, thanks for everything. It's a crazy, crazy world, and somehow we managed to figure this part out. So thanks, everyone.
No, thank you and staff for everything you've done to pull this off. It's nothing short of monumental. So with that, we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Good job, guys.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.